Welcome to the next episode of Navigating Carbon, your compass to carbon management. As always, I'm your host, Deb Ryan. And on this next episode, I sat down with Belladonna Maulianda, the Executive Director of the Indonesian CCS Center. In her role, she's helping develop the domestic carbon capture and storage CCS market in Indonesia, as well as cross-border mechanisms for carbon in Southeast Asia broadly. Her work also supports the Indonesian government in terms of regulatory frameworks for carbon and CCS. Bella and I talked about her work developing these market mechanisms and how she's really helping find value in these kind of projects instead of just having carbon viewed as a cost. And while a lot of Bella's work deals with oil and gas, she's also talking about how she's working with other industries like steel. The other piece, we also dive into a conversation about waste, something that can't be ignored for the island nation of Indonesia. And as we talk about low carbon economy, is a huge part of the equation for them. To make sure you don't miss any new episodes, please like and subscribe to the channel. But for now, sit back and enjoy my conversation with Bella. Hey everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Navigating Carbon podcast. Today I'm joined by Belladonna Maulianda. Bella, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Deb?
Good. We've been organizing to have this conversation for a while, and I'm so excited that we've connected to have it. We met last year in Houston, but you're actually based in Jakarta in Indonesia, and you're involved in founder of an organization called the CCS Institute. Tell us a little bit about that and what the CCS Institute does.
Oh yeah. I founded Indonesian CCS Center in March 2023, and then it was basically requested by one of the coordinating minister of Maritime Investment Affairs, which was leading and championing CCS back then in our government. And then he was asking me to create a nonprofit think tank, independent organization to help the government in terms of back then to organize the Asian Summit side event for CCS. But then, the snowball was rolling, and then we were kind of having more roles at that time until this time being. So we have helped the government to develop the government regulation from the highest one, which is the presidential regulation, and then ministerial regulation. And then we have helped the government to adopt 4 ISO standards on CCS as well. So if you go to our National Standardization Agency website, we already have 4 ISO adopted standards to our national standards. And then last year, it was pretty exciting. We have helped the government to develop new licenses for businesses in CCS. So there were 2 new business licenses for CCS in terms of the capturing side and also in terms of the storing side. And then the
No,
other
it's
part,
really cool.
yeah. We also help the industries depth. So basically, there were many industry players, either global or domestic, that they want to enter the market, or they want to understand about the business model furthermore, or they want to know which are the permitting and so on and so on. So we're pretty much creating and developing the ecosystem, and also the try to push forward Indonesia as the CCS regional hub.
Yeah, no, when we met and chatted, you're doing so many really cool things, and which is why I've been really excited to have this conversation. And for those that are interested, we can put a link for the ISO standards for folks in the show notes and stuff if people want to take a look at that. But like you sort of talked about with a lot of the work you're doing with businesses and with companies, you're doing a lot of business to business and B2B type work and getting licenses and doing some of that kind of development as well. But you're actually also doing some stuff around government to government or G to G as well. And so talk a little bit of what, you're sitting in Indonesia, in Jakarta, like talk a little bit about the importance of some of that intergovernment discussions and negotiations as well as you're looking at carbon capture projects.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing up that for me, that I was going to share about it. So basically, in this part of the world, which is the global south, we're pretty much doing the first in this region, right? As you know, in the other part of the world, which is Norway, US, Canada, and most probably China, already do a lot of things in CCS in terms of, feasibility study, FID, FIT, and so on, until it's already being operational for many, many years. So Indonesia is trying to do the first within this region, and then in order to do so, based on Paris Agreement and London Protocol, for two countries to do a physical transfer of CO2 from the emitting country to the receiving country, we do need to have an arrangement such as an LOI, letter of intent, or to be a binding agreement such as a G2G or an MOU. So Indonesia, which was basically I was leading this negotiation back in 2023 with Singaporean government at the Ministry of Trade and Industry, we had an LOI, letter of intent. So basically, we were the first in the region that has the arrangement in this space. And then ever since then, we had leveraged it to be an MOU by last year in June. And then currently we are trying to leverage it to be a G2G because there are two Indonesian companies, one is private and then one is the state-owned enterprises, that have submitted their proposals to the RFP of Singaporean government. So Singaporean government has already opened one RFP for their first phase, which is 2 or 2.5 MTPA RFP. So we were helping that one also to be pushed forward to be operationalized pretty soon. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. So like in terms of developing these market mechanisms and, setting up these arrangements between governments and, helping the companies in Indonesia be part of that and stuff like that. Talk about some of the market solutions that you look at in terms of CO2 and like how carbon capture is going to play a really big part of that in these like cross-border arrangements and also across different industries as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Deb, for bringing this because a lot of questions from this that they were saying CCS is a cost center, it's not generating any revenue and whatsoever. So basically, since Indonesia is a developing country, we cannot really heavily rely on the government subsidies, such as Norway, the 80% of their government support on Northern Light Hub, and then IRA 45Q from US and so on and so on. So Indonesia, we have to be creative. So we've seen the first activated market is from the cross border, which is either or from together from Singapore, Japan, and South Korea. So basically, they are very productive countries, but then they don't have the subsurface solution to store the CO2. So their industries keep increasing their capacity, keep increasing their emission production, keep increasing their energy consumption, but they don't have solution in terms of the volumetric and viability of the fast solution for the decarbonization. So that's why we've seen the cross-border market as the first activated market. So whereas we're later on, after we can get the first activated market from the cross-border, the idea is to build the first infrastructure from the first initial investment from these cross-border regional countries. And then later on, whereas all the ecosystem, where all the clusters and the infrastructure have already been built in the domestic, since we are going to build the receiving port, for example, aggregator, onshore receiving terminals, and so on and so on. And also, the pipelines, the wellheads, the platform, and so on and so on. Whereas all of these already being built, then the domestic industries can kind of enjoy this built infrastructure at the lower LCOC, levelized cost of CCS, and also MACC, marginal abatement cost curve for CCS. So then the idea is the CCS cluster can help the hard-to-abate industries in the domestic, such as steel, cement, petrochemical, smelters, power plant, and many more. And then for us in Indonesia to be able to reach our NDC and net zero emission. So then I think it's a pretty complex market per se that we cannot really heavily relying on the public sector or private sector. So we're kind of like a market-driven industry for now.
Yeah. And I think the way that you talk about the phases of the project is really, really fascinating because, like you said, that initial capital cost, Indonesia is a really good place for CCUS because it does have a lot of subsurface infrastructure that maybe, some of the other countries don't have in terms of there's a lot of oil fields and things like that have been developed and a lot of that aquifers and things like that can be leveraged and used. So it's in terms of the fact that it's not just being developed for oil and gas, but it's looking across every single one of the sectors as well. And like you said, then the cost of entry for all those other sectors is so much lower. It's such a huge again, it was something that when we were first chatting and stuff, it's a really interesting way that you guys are approaching the solution here to really help everyone. And I think it's fascinating. So just as we kind of think about some of those like long-term contracts and the idea of like a reverse gas contract coming back into Indonesia and stuff, can you just talk a little bit about like how does carbon price and like carbon market mechanisms, like how is that helping you get these deals and get some of this funding in to get the projects up and running, to build the infrastructure?
Oh, that's a difficult question. So basically, there are a few types of business models that we've seen currently, Deb. So the first business model or first activated market is the carbon tax for the from the neighboring countries. So we are following the neighboring countries' carbon tax. So just to give you a bit of a logic or common sense, these industries want to pay at a lower cost from their carbon tax. So, for example, probably this year, Singapore will increase the carbon tax to be around $45 per ton. So then they would find other solutions to be able to be lower that $45. But then, of course, the emitting companies from Singaporean side, it's still being subsidized by the government in terms of the whole value chain. So then, probably this is not the right example, but that's the whole idea. So the companies from the emitting countries want to find the CCS solution that is lower than the carbon tax from their originating country. So that's the long term idea. And then the second one will be the industries that looks forward for producing the low carbon products. So, for example, Indonesia has been exporting steel to EU, and then EU is going to imply and apply the CBAM pretty soon, right? So then, instead of they're paying the carbon for EU to enter the market in EU or to be able to not get penalty or whatsoever, so then they better to build their infrastructure and facilities back in Indonesia to reduce their carbon. So I think that's the second business model. And then the third business model that we've seen that is the license to invest. So, for example, there are many global ENP companies in Indonesia. They already have their mandates from their headquarters. Namely, I think I can see around three already that have been doing that in Indonesia, and one is already in the construction phase, one is already in the FID phase. That they cannot do further ENP investment if they cannot do CCS or CCUS. So it's kind of like a license to invest because for example, one of the company is producing natural gas and then the CO2 concentration is pretty high, around 12%. So they have to do something about it, right? If not, then it's gonna be impacting their HQ carbon emission, and then they have to report to their country, and it's gonna be affecting their country emission profile and so on. So I think those three business models that I've seen in pretty general there.
And I think they all, like in other parts of the world, I've seen like one of those play out to a certain extent where it's something like a local carbon price or there's a mandate from the government to reduce emissions or they're looking at CBAM, whereas you guys have all three really playing to really kind of make the environment quite competitive in terms of why why you're actually able to get some of these projects and starting to get some interest from companies to actually build the infrastructure, which is really cool. I think it's interesting to see how it's all coming together in Indonesia. You've talked a little bit about the other industries and like steel in particular. Like how obviously the subset or the skill set, sorry, around actual CCS and, moving natural gas. So CO2 becomes, when we're actually talking about physical gas, there's a lot of skill sets there from the oil and gas industry. How are you actually working and partnering with industries like steel to really help them along the way on their decarbonization, and helping them along with that?
Yeah. That's another difficult question, Deb. So basically, our industries is pretty varying. So they have different level of understanding. They have different level of knowledge in terms of decarbonization and so on and so on. So that's why by the end of last year, we held a domestic industry workshop to be able to understand their level of knowledge, their level of willingness to pay, their level of willingness to invest, the level to choose CCS instead of other decarbonization solutions such as electrification, fuel switching, and so on and so on. So we did that by the end of last year. So we try to understand. And basically, it's pretty fascinating that they're pretty much aware and they pretty much know about CCS and CCUS. I think because they already partner with some of the global players that. So, for example, in our steel industry, one of their major stake holder or one of their share owner is from Korea. And then this Korean company, they are a holding company, and one of their subholding company is an ENP. Uh, right. So it's pretty much, I think they've been partnering with some of the global players. Right? Same with petrochemicals, right? These petrochemicals, I think either they've been partner or they've been approached by the potential ENP players for the injector side. So they're trying to get as much as emitter as possible. So then, in doing so, they have to do advocacy. They have to do informal engagement, and they have to do level up their emitters knowledge. Right. I think that's kind of the beauty of this industry in CCS, that it's pretty much like everyone is doing a lot of things, even though it's not pretty much, how should I say, in one direction, but I think they're pretty much understand that it's important to be able to do CCS. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And again, as we've sort of talked about, there's so many different parts of the different industrial complex that are all coming together in Indonesia, and not just one piece of it, which is really fascinating. I know one of the things that you and I have talked about previously when we've chatted about it, and you mentioned it at the beginning, like Indonesia is a developing country. A lot of the low carbon economy is really focused on waste then, in terms of, you know, you're a nation full of islands and things like that. Talk about, just give people a sense of the waste kind of issue, and like as it relates to the low carbon economy and some of the challenges around emission reduction, and some of the things that you're also looking at in that sort of waste to energy space and waste space generally.
Yeah. So this was just recently, that last year in October, our government launched a new presidential regulation on waste to energy. Since we are facing the waste crisis, so we have a lot of waste, and then it was just dumped in the landfill, and then, it's reducing the methane and whatsoever, and then we don't really have the land to have more waste, basically. So then the government just launched a new presidential regulation number 110 year 2025, and it was basically PLN, our electricity provider, will take that electricity from waste to energy incinerator. So basically, PLN will pay a pretty premium price. And then our new investment government agency, it's called Danantara, already launched few RFPs for few prioritized cities that are facing the most waste crisis. And then amazingly, there are many international players actually from China, Japan, and also EU. So then, the one of the criteria that they have to do is basically to partner with the local partner. So then later on, there is a knowledge transfer, there are industrialization, there are downstream industry that's going to be built, and so on and so on. So that's the whole idea. But then, as you know, waste it's a waste. It's an organic matter, right? So basically, you're solving one problem, which is a waste problem, but then you're making a new problem, in my point of view, yeah, which is producing emission. So then I think this is another potential for CCS and CCUS to be integrated with waste to energy, or what we call it BECS, right? Which is in the carbon market currently is pretty much having the most highest price for the carbon credit, which is coming from BECS. So I think that's another potential that we're looking for, that basically to integrate the waste to energy to be integrated with CCS, a power plant of waste to energy, or to convert some of the existing coal or gas fired power plant to be proportional, 30% of it to be a biomass power plant, for example, and then still 70% is the existing fossil fuel. Those sort of things. We've already talked to PLN, and then we're trying to support PLN in terms of doing so.
No, it's a really cool because, like you said, it brings in so many different components of not just energy production generally for the company, but then actually also on the backside doing the bioenergy with CCUS from the carbon crediting perspective as well. And so it starts to bring some of those carbon pricing and carbon mechanisms back in as well to make these projects viable for companies and for folks as well. So it's again, it's another really fascinating piece, and we'll have to check in again in the future when some of these projects up and running and learn more about them as they're getting going. So the final thing I wanted to talk to you about, and it's fascinating because I think you and I have got similar pasts, but we've taken in very different ways with our careers and stuff. But just for folks that are really interested in the work you're doing and fascinated, by where you've ended up, like just give people a little bit of a snapshot of where your career started and how you kind of got into running the CCS Institute and founding that, because I think it's fascinating.
Oh, thank you, Deb. Yeah, I think since we are around the same age, right? If I'm not mistaken. So then I think we're pretty much having go through the same career path. But I can share from my journey. So basically, I was a chemical engineer by training from University of Indonesia, and then when I graduated, I got hired by SLB or Schlumberger back then, and directly, and then to be put as a field engineer in Canada for like doing their wireline open hole logging is basically for those who are not aware of it. So basically, we put some tools inside of the earth, and we try to find where are the oil and gas are located. And then it was pretty tough since I had to drive trucks and then lifting all the tools, which was around 80 or 100 kilograms. Um, and then, but then, it was giving me a pretty much a life journey that never been bought, cannot be bought, I guess. Like, it's teaching me about persistence and grit and perseverance, right? And then after that, since it was so hard for me, I just did that for a couple of years in Canada and Scotland, and then I moved back to Indonesia, worked for Total, and then did reservoir studies. I did a PVT, well testing, production logging, and so on and so on. So basically, all this field engineer and then reservoir studies give me a very good backbone to build a CCS right now. Since after that, I moved back to Canada and then did my PhD. So I did pretty much a very, how to say, aligned CCS topic. It wasn't really CCS heavily topic, but then I was injecting hydraulic fracturing fluid, which was a CO2, because back then tight gas sandstone in Canada was pretty much water sensitive. So we have to find another options for the hydraulic fracturing fluid, and then we chose for CO2 back then. So it was kind of scientifically a CCUS and CCS at the same time. And then I did my PhD. After that, I moved back to Malaysia, and then I was working as an assistant professor. And then I was doing 3 Petronas projects in Canada. It was also about that, about injecting CO2 to their tight gas sandstone, and then doing some very advanced modeling to see on the reservoir scale. And after that, I moved back to Indonesia back in 2020, and then I worked for Pertamina, led few CCS and CCUS projects throughout Indonesia. And after that, I moved to consultant, a bit of ESG, and then about carbon credits and so on and so on. And then I got hijacked by our government, and then to help them to support
Yeah,
them and develop the regulation, develop the ecosystem. Basically, as a ecosystem builder back then, and then founded
yeah.
Indonesian CCS Center. And then currently, I'm still serving as a pro hire to our vice chairman of parliament. And then since CCS is a new industry, we still need to have a political support in some sense, right? So that's why we are still helping many ministries to develop their derivative regulation and then to help the industries as well. Since in our Indonesia CCS Center, we have 26 corporate members right now. And then basically it's the whole stakeholders or the whole industries in in different value chain. We do have the emitters, we do have the transporters, we do have the injectors, we do have the enablers, we do have World Bank as one of our corporate members, which is IFC, and we also have Japanese government, JOCMEC, and so on. So basically, for whoever that wants to follow my path and your path, right? I think just to do your best, and then go always being curious in doing new things. And then in my experience, I never said no to a new experience since I love learning new stuff. And I think that's what bring me to this point with that.
I love that. And I think, like you said, never say no. You'll end up in northern Canada lifting wireline tools around, and then finding yourself running the institute. So as we wrap up, this has been a great conversation. It's so cool to hear about what you guys are doing. What's on the radar for you this year? Like, what are you really excited about with CCS Institute? What should people be looking out for?
Thank you, Deb. So hopefully Indonesia would win the Singaporean tender. So that's the first thing that we're looking for, since this is going to be acting as an opener, like a proof of concept. It's like, if we can get this first activated market from Singapore, we can kind of get the trust from Japanese side, from Korean side, and so on, and also to build our domestic market. So I think hopefully if we can win that within this year, that would be awesome. And then I think the other thing, we're still developing some of the regulations, some of the government systems. So currently, I'm also included in the steering committee of the carbon credit trading system. DEP. It was just also launched last year. So basically, we're trying to develop two new systems. One is for the reporting side for UNFCCC, for the NDC, and then the other one is for the trading side. So I'm helping on the trading side from the EBS engineered base solution. So that's the system that we're trying to build. We got help from few international organizations such as CDSC, Climate Data Steering Committee, IETA, and so on. And then hopefully, if this system, register system, can be up and running, it can help the compliance market and also voluntary market to push forward the carbon credit from Indonesia, since we already have many project in pipelines, many buyers of takers from US, Canada, Japan, and Korea in different schemes, in JCM schemes and Article 6 schemes, and many more. So hopefully that's the second one that we're trying to push forward to. And then the third one, of course, pushing forward still for the ecosystem for CCS, either waste to energy, either the CCUS, either the CCS license to invest. We are having 19 pre-projects right now on that for CCS and CCS, with a total of investment around $43 billion. So hopefully there will be more progresses in terms of that.
Yeah. So much stuff. We'll have to sit down, like I said, in like 12 months' time and unpack all of that, and so much more to see what's coming down the pipeline for both you at the CCS Institute and generally within Indonesia. Bella, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today.
Of course, always that. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks.